It's being described, as it possibly is, at the end of an era. Shiv Sena patriarch Bal Thackeray passed away at 3:30 this afternoon in Mumbai at his residence, Matoshri. He was declared dead after a massive cardiac arrest. Many individuals landed up at Matoshri to pay respects to Bal Thackeray at that hour. But it was preceded, his demise, by a few days of speculation on his condition. On Thursday evening late, Uddhav Thackeray, his son, came out and said that Bal Thackeray was stable, that he was recovering against the odds. Therefore, his demise, 3:30 this afternoon, came as a shock. It was against the grain. The Sena patriarch was battling respiratory disorders as well as those with regards to his pancreas, and many people were of the opinion that he would pull through, but that unfortunately did not happen. There were several people, of course, by his side, including his nephew and his son, as well as, of course, his grandchildren, his family. Many of them had been receiving a string of visitors over the last 72 hours since speculation had been growing on Mr. Bal Thackeray's physical failing condition. Many of those individuals came and paid their tributes. A lot of them had poignant messages, described the Sena chief as a Marathi Manus, as a regionalist, as a warrior, as uncompromisingly patriotic, a principal leader, an iconoclast caricaturist. Many people also came out. Those who did not see eye to eye with his political ideology came out and said he was a communalist, a dictator, a polemicist, a regionalist, someone who brought in a different dimension to the politics of Maharashtra. Let's go across first to Sahil Joshi to get a sense of the last moments of the Sena patriarch. Sahil, you were there at Matoshri. Describe what actually happened.
Rahul, the whole atmosphere inside Matoshri was very somber, and we could sense a lot of grief within Matoshri. I saw many Shiv Sena leaders actually crying, and they had been with Balasaheb Thackeray since last 30-40 years. I saw Manohar Joshi in a great grief. I also saw Raj Thackeray taking charge of the situation and actually planning for tomorrow's cremation. I also saw many Shiv Sena leaders breaking down on Raj Thackeray's shoulders and Raj Thackeray consoling them. So the whole atmosphere kind of was a kind of a family, because Shiv Sena as a party and Balasaheb Thackeray being a patriarch of Shiv Sena since last so many years, it had become like a big family for Shiv Senics and especially for the Thackeray family. So that relation we could sense here. Outside Matoshri, we could hear a lot of Shiv Senics gathered and shouting slogans for Balasaheb Thackeray. Shiv Sena leaders tried to come out and pacify them, but despite that, we saw that Mumbai, Thane, Navi Mumbai and many big cities in Maharashtra shutting down immediately after the declaration of Balasaheb Thackeray's death. So basically the whole atmosphere had turned completely like a family, and the whole atmosphere was in the grief. But right now I can sense that it will be a very difficult situation for Shiv Sena after Balasaheb's death to come out of this situation, and we will have to wait and see how Uddhav Thackeray controls this situation, because he himself is fighting with the health issues. He has undergone angioplasty and he is yet to recover. So basically we will have to wait and see how he actually recovers, and he recovers Shiv Sena also from this big setback.
Of course, that's the larger question of his political legacy, and who is perhaps most capable of taking it forward, which we're going to look at a little later on in the show. We are joined tonight by Aarti Jairath, senior journalist, also Veer Sanghvi, senior journalist with us in our studios, someone who knew Mr. Bal Thackeray and observed him at very close quarters. Paranjoy Thakurta also joining us. He's been, of course, with us this evening, talking about the different facets of the politics of Mr. Bal Thackeray, the legacy and other related issues. Also Venugopal Dhoot, industrialist, joining us to talk a little bit about perhaps why the relationship between business and the Shiv Sena at some levels was unpredictable, but also ideologically consistent. We're going to look at some of these issues in the course of the evening, but let's first focus on some of the tributes that have been paid all through this evening to Bal Thackeray.
বাল ঠাকরেজির মৃত্যুতে তার পরিবার পরিজন তার শুভার্থী সকলকেই আমাদের শোক এবং সমবেদনা জানাচ্ছি এবং কেউ তাকে মানতে পারেন কেউ না মানতে পারেন এটা পলিটিক্যাল ইডিওলজির ব্যাপার কখনো তর্ক বিতর্কও হয়েছে কিন্তু বাল ঠাকরে নিজের একটা নিজস্বতা নিয়ে সারা জীবন রাজনীতি করে গেছেন
ऐसे निर्भीक राजनेता नेतृत्वकर्ता विचारक जिन्होंने इस देश को राजनीति को एक नई दिशा दी आज हमारे बीच नहीं रहे निश्चित रूप से देश के लिए काफी बड़ा नुकसान है और मैं अपनी ओर से विनम्र श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं कि उनकी आत्मा को शांति मिले उनके परिवार परिजनों को इस शोक बेला में इस दुख को सहने की शक्ति दे उनके लंबे संघर्षपूर्ण राजनीतिक जीवन और ओजस्वी वक्ता के रूप में अच्छे मार्गदर्शक के रूप में देश सदा सदा उनको याद करेगा
Sad to know that Bala Sahib is no more. Although I had political differences with his ideology, yet I admired his sharp wit and his courage of conviction. He has left a legacy for the Thackeray families and the Shiv Sena. I would like to convey my heartfelt condolences to the Thackeray family and particularly Udhav, who has been a personal friend of mine.
बाला साहब एक ऐसे व्यक्तित्व थे जिन्होंने जिस विषय पर जो सोचा उसे बहुत बेबाकी से बोला कभी किंतु परंतु अगर मगर लगाकर नहीं बोला लेकिन कभी वो विरोध से विचलित नहीं हुए मैं ये मानती हूं कि उनका व्यक्तित्व हिमालय जितना ऊंचा था और हिमालय जितना ही अडिग ऐसे व्यक्तित्व का जाना भारतीय राजनीति के लिए एक अपूरणीय क्षति है और मुझे तो जीवन में उनसे बहुत आत्मीयता मिली मैं अपने आप को धन्यभागी मानती हूं कि भरपूर स्नेह एक ऐसी महान शख्सियत ने मुझे दिया
political leader who has left such a deep and abiding imprint on the country's events, uncompromising in his patriotism, he possessed remarkable qualities of leadership. I can only say that his demise today has left a gaping void in the country's politics which will not be easy to fill.
मैं भारतीय जनता पार्टी की ओर से उनको श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं और भगवान से प्रार्थना करता हूं कि उनकी आत्मा को शांति दे और उनके सभी पुत्र परिवार उद्धव ठाकरे जी और सभी बाल ठाकरे जी और बाकी सभी परिवारगणों को ये दुख सहन करने का साहस दे यही ईश्वर के चरणों में प्रार्थना करता हूं
Well, several people today have spoken. Several top leaders cutting across the political spectrum have paid tribute to Bala Thackeray. We're going to also, of course, focus on his life and times. It's always difficult to condense the life and times of someone who has contributed so much, perhaps in different ways, to the political landscape of a particular state or a region or the national discourse as such. But we've tried to condense it into about 10 what we call iconic photographs, which encapsulate perhaps the trajectory, the political trajectory, that may be more accurate, of the evolution of Bal Thackeray. The first snapshot on your screens addressing a first major rally after the formation of the Shiv Sena in 1966, Veer Sangvi. This was the moment when Bal Thackeray decided to introduce himself really. What was his politics at that time? Because there have been many avatars. He positioned himself to begin with as a nationalist, but what was his brand of nationalism? Was it divisive nationalism from the beginning? Was it a cultural nationalism? Was it an ultra-nationalism? Talk us through those early years.
I don't think there was much nationalism, frankly. There was a lot of regional chauvinism in those days. Bal Thackeray was created by Vasantrao Naik and S.K. Patil and other leaders of the Congress at that
So it was a
period.
divisive sub-nationalism. That's what you're suggesting.
It was even more specific in that. There were communist trade unions which were taking over in North India, North Bombay. They wanted a non-communist alternative that was capitalist friendly. Bal Thackeray said he could mobilize people on the basis of Marathi identity, and that rally was an example of his using Marathi identity to promote that. He then went on and beat up many South Indians, attacked the communists. He regarded communists as being extra-constitutional, people with national loyalties, people who are beyond the pale. But at that stage, to call him a cultural nationalist or whatever is pushing it. He was no more than a trade unionist who was capitalizing on Marathi sentiment.
Okay. So in a sense, he was also trying to create a physical political space for himself by opportunistically, as most politicians do, Mr. Sanghvi, try and capitalize on a void that was perhaps taking place. Would you agree with that, Mr. Thakurta?
I agree with him. I want to add, as a person who personally never subscribed to his brand of politics, Balasaheb Thackeray epitomized ultra-nationalism, a kind of a visceral form of hatred against Muslims in general, Pakistan in particular. And how many people in this world do you know, even in Germany, who were so unabashed in his adulation for Adolf Hitler? Mr. Advani, Mr. Vajpayee were all apologetic about what happened on the 6th of December 1992 when the Babri Masjid was demolished. But not Bal Thackeray. Balasaheb Thackeray was proud and openly said yes, his followers participated in the demolition of the Babri Masjid.
Okay.
When the communal riots took place in Mumbai and there was a Sri Krishna Commission of Inquiry, the Shiv Seniks were in the forefront of trying to stall that inquiry. And when the commission came out with a report identifying, you know, the individuals who were responsible for that communal carnage, yes, including Shiv Seniks, at that time the Shiv Sena was in power, and it made sure that those recommendations were never implemented.
Okay.
So in a sense, Balasaheb Thackeray, you know, I mean, we're not supposed to speak ill of the dead, but let's also accept the fact that Balasaheb Thackeray epitomized a kind of ultra-nationalist, extreme right-wing.
How much of that was reflected? How much of that was reflected in his speeches? The second image we're going to show you is a very important speech that many people suggested was first at Shivaji Park, where Balasaheb Thackeray actually began to give shape to his views and thoughts. What would be the kind of discourse, Aarti Jairat, if you can hear me, what was the kind of discourse that one would have expected to hear if one was standing on the other side of the dais listening to Balasaheb Thackeray in the 60s?
Well, as you know, I think Balasaheb Thackeray very successfully used the politics of violence and hatred, you know, to you know, sort of become a political figure in Maharashtra. And, you know, he also was a person who could appeal to the emotions of the crowd. He manipulated the emotions very well. So it would be a mixture of emotion and appealing to, I think, a baser human instinct, which, you know, is sort of kind of okay with hatred, okay with violence, and he appealed to that, and he appealed very successfully.
Yes.
I mean, it's unfortunate that Balasaheb Thackeray, you know, as Paranjay said, you don't want to speak ill of the dead, but, you know, he sort of gave legitimacy to that kind of politics.
Okay, he did. But let's just look at the third photograph, Mr. Sanghvi.
Do you want me to come in on the second
yes,
one?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
I think the way people are sort of caricaturing Bal Thackeray, the suggestion is that at his speeches, they were like Nuremberg torchlit rallies and he sort of went Sieg Heil and they all goose step.
Yes.
It was actually nothing like that. The thing about Thackeray's speeches is that unlike your classic fascist ideologue, which is how people want to caricature him in retrospect, he was actually a very witty speaker. He spoke slowly. He had many jokes in Marathi. He made fun. He was sardonic. He was sarcastic. Rarely did he move crowds to goose-stepping fervor. The point about Thackeray is that the standard fascist caricature never quite fit. He may well have been an admirer of Adolf Hitler, and I have had many conversations with him about that, but that was not his appeal to crowds. His appeal to crowds was that he was witty, he was funny, and he could hold them in his thrall just because he was so articulate.
Well, of course, a lot of people would suggest that he was, at some level or the other, leveraging the power of humor to make perhaps pithy points, maybe even points in a sardonic manner, to connect with the pathos, perhaps, of the ordinary lives of his audience. I mean, is that perhaps one of those fundamental philosophies that he sort of chose?
Yeah, that's a lot of big words, Rahul, but I think basically he was just a good speaker. He was entertaining. People liked listening to him because he spoke simply, he was funny, he was engaging, and as you say, he captured their sentiments and put them across in an entertaining way.
Okay. Picture 3, meeting with Karuna after the first campaign against South Indian migrants in Mumbai. Many people found it a contradiction in terms that he was a torchbearer for identity politics in the melting pot that is, of course, Mumbai. Let's have a look at some of the other snapshots, because they will throw up conversation points. That snapshot 4, meeting with Indira Gandhi during the emergency period. Thackeray supported Indira's move. Were you at all surprised, Veer Sanghvi, that he did?
He was a Congress creation. Why wouldn't he support her? The picture with Karunanidhi was interesting because initially, after the 66th rally, which you had pictures, whenever they went out on a rampage, Shiv Senics, they would look for South Indians. They beat up South Indian shoe shine boys outside Churchgate Station. Wherever there was a South Indian who had a shop, they would go and destroy it. They would attack Udupi restaurants. And on the whole, it must be said, to the shame of the Congress party, the local Congress did nothing at all to stop him. The police were told to go easy on him. The Congress used Thackeray to fight the communists, and Thackeray, at least till her death, I think, worshipped Indira Gandhi.
Okay, Paranjoy Thakurta, he changed his targets as he went along in the political journey. He began with perhaps some of the South Indians, as those photographs seem to suggest, in his heart-to-heart conversations with Karunanidhi at that point, trying to mend fences, but the damage had been done. But he moved on. His targets changed. They were variable.
You know, Balasaheb Thackeray was a man with contradictions. There's no doubt about that. You know, I mean, it was not just the South Indians he targeted. His nephew has taken up, you know, in a sense where he left off, where you target taxi drivers who are from Uttar Pradesh or Bihar. The whole sons of the soil theory, which has a very emotive appeal among Maharashtrians, among middle-class Maharashtrians, and to raise this bogey or how they were being reduced to a minority in their own city, that had a certain appeal among a certain section of Maharashtrians. What Veer Sanghvi said is correct. Balasaheb Thackeray and the Shiv Sena would never have come up, even in the 60s, if it hadn't been for the divisions within the Congress, the Bombay Pradesh Congress Committee and the Maharashtra Pradesh Congress Committee on the inclusion of whether Bombay should be or Mumbai should be a part of Maharashtra. That was one part of the story. But also what is very interesting is when you contrast, you know, what happened when Balasaheb Thackeray was disenfranchised for his hate speeches by the court.
Okay.
You know, the belligerence in the words that the articles that were attributed to him were in sharp contrast to the positions that he would take when he was in court, where he was far more mild in his tone. And he said, no, I should not be disenfranchised, you know. I mean, and so there was this contrast in the man, that at one, to some he appeared to be this fire-breathing, rabble-rousing kind of guy. But in personal life, he appeared to be incredibly mild-mannered.
Important turning points in his evolution told through 10 significant photographs. We had looked at 4. The first one of them being his addressing a major rally after formation of the Shiv Sena in 1966. Then his message in that particular rally to some of his supporters, as also, of course, his meetings with other leaders of the opposition, meeting with Karuna after first campaign against the South Indian migrants in Mumbai, and then meeting with Indira Gandhi during the emergency period. Thackeray had supported Indira's move. He said that he found her assertion or assertiveness something admirable, and he said that she was a benevolent dictator he admired. Iconic snapshot 5. Thackeray, Sharad Pawar and George Fernandez as allies in 1982 against the Mill Workers Union. Veer Sanghvi, tell us a little bit more about this unlikely combination. If one were to look at it today, it would be unthinkable, but back then, they seemed to be all together, sharing a stage.
Look, people forget now, but in 1982, the labor scene in Bombay was dominated by Datta Samant. And all of these guys were more united by their hatred of Datta Samant than by any love of each other. I know Bal Thackeray tried quite hard to be nice to George Fernandez, but George Fernandez loathed Bal Thackeray. He loathed everything he stood for and was consistently rude and unpleasant about him. Sharad Pawar had a rather more accommodating attitude, and the two men often got on. There were periods when they didn't get on, but this was purely an alliance of convenience based on antipathy to Datta Samant.
Venugopal Dhoot, you represent, of course, the business community. It was difficult, the environment back then, doing business in Mumbai. Many people say that Thackeray was an enabler in some ways. I mean, there was, of course, the flip side to his intervention. Some of those were extortionist in nature. But by and large, he did change the discourse. Would you agree, Mr. Dhoot?
Yeah. No, he was helping industrialists. Hardly you would say that any industrialist is not known to him. Everybody has gone to him, paid regards. 2 days back, I and Rahul Bajaj also met him, Uddhav Thackeray, Raj Thackeray. So everybody had a respect with him. Why? Because he used to promote industry. He used to say that work hard. I tell you one example, small in 2 minutes. He told me that when he was a child, 12-year-old, he had gone to shop and purchase a lottery ticket and won 500 rupees at that time, 70 years back, and showed to his father. Father burned those 500 rupees in front of him and said that earn money by hard work. And that's what he has been telling to all industrialists. You work hard and get money, earn money, and if possible, do business in Maharashtra, otherwise go globally. So this was his attitude toward the industry. So I think that he has helped this Mumbai also to grow, Maharashtra to grow, and also he has also become a part of growth in India also.
Aarti Jairath, do you view Bal Thackeray as a pragmatist? Many people say politically he may not have been that pragmatic because his vision had begun to limit itself, cannibalized itself, and he needed reinvention. But certainly if one were to listen to what Mr. Dhoot was saying, there was an element of pragmatism to his philosophy, specifically the economic views.
Well, if we want to look at, one of his really pragmatic things, if you remember before they came to power in 1995, they had talked about throwing the agreement, the power agreement with Enron into the Arabian Sea. And yet, when they came to power in 1995, they renegotiated that Enron deal, and allowed Enron to stay in Maharashtra. So, I mean, I think that's really a reflection of how pragmatic he could be.
Right.
Out of power saying one thing, in power saying something else and doing something else.
Right, interesting. Let's also look at some of the other images. We put out some other moments, of course, on your screens. These are more to do with an overall political evolution of Mr. Bal Thackeray. 66 formed the Shiv Sena initially as anti-communist force. We've been discussing that. Launched the Samna mouthpiece, used it to attack the influx of South and North Indians. Several such moments, of course, unfolded. Supporters allegedly involved in Babri Masjid, and he came out and congratulated some of them on the back of the riots in Mumbai because it fitted in, at least at that point, into his latest political trick at that moment, which was, of course, to turn communalist. Sena forms the Maharashtra government with the BJP as an ally. He was thought to have controlled it via remote control, caricatured by Salman Rushdie in Moor's Last Sign, so and so forth. But let's come back to some of those pictures that we've been showing you of his political evolution, Mr. Sanghvi, and we're going to show you the sixth image which talks a little bit more about the change in focus really of how Bal Thackeray saw himself at the top of the 90s, going into what many people would say was the peak really of his, as far as the political side of his movement was concerned, as they captured power. Amitabh Bachchan, in the aftermath of the Bofors scandal, let's look at snapshot 7, which will take us on to the protest that he led, squatting and closing his ears to fireworks at Girgaon Chowpatty as ally Advani smiles. This was a very beneficial political alliance with the Bharatiya Janata Party for the Shiv Sena.
More beneficial for the Bharatiya Janata Party, not that beneficial for the Shiv Sena, I don't think. Around the time the Shiv Sena was already a force, the Jan Sangh as it was then, didn't actually count for very much in Maharashtra. There was the Congress, there were the old socialist people like Inji Gore and Mrinal Gore and people like that, who stood for something. The BJP in the Jan Sangh really didn't have much of a presence. The RSS in Nagpur was a force that Thackeray was actively opposed to, mainly because of the Brahmins, and he wasn't wild about Brahmins. If it wasn't for Pramod Mahajan, who was a friend of Bal Thackeray's, and convinced Advani and Vajpayee that they could use Thackeray as a stepping stone, that alliance would never have come about.
Well, interesting point of view. Let's look at some of the other photographs. These other moments, specifically the one where he's at the swearing in of Manohar Joshi. Sena BJP alliance won them their finest day really over the last decade in Maharashtra as they came to power. Snapshot 9, the filial bonhomie before the split, Thackeray with son Uddhav and nephew Raj. Paranjoy Thakurta, today many people are going to ask the question about legacy, the Thackeray legacy, whether it's Uddhav or it's Raj who's better qualified to take it forward. What do you see happening with this legacy? Is it a self-limiting legacy, or can it be reinvented?
You know, it's truly ironical that the same Balasaheb Thackeray who raved and ranted against the dynastic politics of the Congress party should have faced such a dilemma in anointing his successor, whether it should be his son Uddhav or his nephew Raj, who many would argue looked a lot like him. And at the end of the day, Raj parted ways and set up the MNS. And I want to add to a few points that Veer Sanghvi earlier made, and what Mr. Venugopal Dhoot made. You know, it's not surprising that the industrialists loved him, because as Veer Sanghvi earlier pointed out, he was instrumental in breaking the back of the communist trade unions in the textile industry, and thereafter Datta Samant's power over the textile workers, because he was able to divide the Marathis from the non-Marathis. So in that sense, he became a kind of a darling of the industrialists, because willy-nilly he helped them out. And the other thing about him was that, you know, despite his belligerence, despite the way he would talk, you know, Mehdi Hasan out, India don't play cricket with Pakistan. In a sense, they all were willing to play ball with him, perhaps not so much because of ideological affinity, but because they also realized he had a huge amount of nuisance value. He would make life pretty miserable if you didn't go along with him.
But perhaps that's one of the reasons why the Mumbai police has also come out and issued an advisory, because some of his Sainiks given to exuberance might react in a manner which could perhaps lead to some sort of disorder in the city, on the back really of the Sena muscular style of operating and executing its politics. An important point being made there. Let's, however, bring the focus back on the legacy. We put together this small little story, if you like, of the bitter parting between his political heirs, Uddhav and Raj. And then we'll focus a little bit more on who's going to take over the mantle.
Uddhav and Raj, carved from the same stone but as different as chalk and cheese. Both of them contenders to Balasaheb's contentious legacy of militant Hindutva. Has Raj stolen a march over his cousin? In a September interview to Samna, Bal Thackeray seemed to make an appeal to his followers. Keep the loyalties intact. Do you change your parents? Then don't change your party. Bal Thackeray's decision to anoint Uddhav the successor in 2004 left Raj stunned. 2 years later, Raj formed the Maharashtra Navnirman Sena. The bitter feud between the cousins shut the Sena out of power in Maharashtra and left the aging tiger mortally wounded. Asked by his Marathi mouthpiece why no one could inherit his legacy as a cartoonist, Thackeray said, "Who will take it forward? I thought Raja will carry it forward." Raj has been quicker to borrow his political ideology from Balasaheb. His vicious opposition to immigrants from North India and his constant emphasis on the Maratha Manus is copybook identity politics as perfected by Balasaheb himself.
It seems very much so that Raj Thackeray has molded himself on the lines of his uncle. That's one. But will his brand of politics of parochialism, chauvinism, fear, revenge, retribution, intolerance, will that survive? I think the answer is yes, and you can see it across the country.
But in his son Aditya Thackeray, Uddhav may have found an antidote to Raj's growing popularity. But even better will be a rapprochement with his estranged cousin. The two have recently been close, Raj visiting Uddhav when he was undergoing a heart surgery, and again by the patriarch's side as he fought death.
He was in that sense epitomized ultranationalism, rabid right-wing politics, a unique personality, but also a personality riddled with contradictions.
The battle between the cousins created the epic Mahabharata. Calling a halt to hostilities between the Sena and the MNS could reignite their fortunes ahead of the 2014 elections. Bureau Report, headlines today.
Before we turn our attention to what this all means for Maharashtra politics as a whole, let's focus on the point that we raised via that little package we showed you, on who's going to take this legacy forward. Parunjoy Thakurta, a choice was made by Balasaheb Thackeray some years ago when he picked his son to be his political legatee. That led to a cleavage between the Thackeray sons. Is that going to be overcome, that bitterness, over the last 3 or 4 years?
See, Bal Thackeray was a towering personality. In his absence, whether Uddhav and Raj will patch up, it's, time alone can tell. You could theoretically argue that it would be in their own respective self-interest if they came together. Because with the Shiv Sena on one side and the NS on the other side, both are relatively weaker. But I do not know whether the egos of these two individuals will stop clashing, and whether they'd be able to sort of work out some kind of an arrangement. But if they do not unite, if the Shiv Sena is continues to be headed by Uddhav and the MNS is headed by Raj, then at the end of the day, my personal view is both these two political parties would get relatively marginalized in Maharashtra politics.
Okay.
Again, I'm kind of indulging in a huge amount of guesswork.
Naturally. Let me quickly bring in Aarti Jerath. On that point that Mr. Thakurta made, is there much of a legacy really to inherit? Or will there have to be a massive reinvention?
Well, I think the first point really is to see how, what is the kind of arrangement that Raj and Uddhav come to now that Bal Thackeray has gone. I think we've seen some kind of coming together of the cousins of the last few weeks, in view of Uddhav's ill health and then of course Balasaheb's own ill health and subsequent demise. So, obviously something is happening over there. Now, once they work out an arrangement, and what are going to be the contours of the arrangement, only time will tell. But once they work out an arrangement, I think that, yes, there will have to be some kind of reinvention of the Shiv Sena's politics. Because, on the other side, interesting things are happening as well. We're seeing Ajit Pawar, coming out of Sharad Pawar's shadow, trying to stake his claim to that legacy of the NCP. And, all this is sort of largely confined to, well, not confined to, but largely, operates in areas like Western Maharashtra, Marathwada, Khandesh, Konkan and so on. And we have this huge Vidarbha where, neither of these two figures really seems to have much of a strong base.
That's an interesting point.
Vidarbha has traditionally been demanding separate, a separate statehood.
So there is a different dynamic at work.
See this Vidarbha movement gain. Absolutely. It's I think Maharashtra politics is churning right now.
Churning right now. Okay, let me come to
what comes out of this churn.
Okay, let me come to Veer Sanghvi on that point. There is an opportunity. The NCP is going through its own evolutionary problems, already looking at a post-Pawar sort of transition. You have the Congress that is discredited, yes, but has the wherewithal, at least on the ground, at some level, but doesn't have a leader that is charismatic enough to tide the party over and capture the imagination in the state. Where does the Sena fit in, and what can it do to capture that space?
Okay, let's divide this into many parts. First of all, the Sena is the principal opposition party in Maharashtra. To talk about it being marginalized, etc., etc., it's crazy. It's the Congress NCP, seen by many people as the same party, and there is the Sena. If the BJP has any role, it's on the coattails of the Sena. I don't know either of these boys, so you'll have to ask your other panelists about whether they can make up or not. I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is why Bal Thackeray chose Uddhav, from what he told me. His argument was the Sena was now in a different phase. It did not need someone like him. It needed somebody who was sober, who was mature, who could oversee the party through a second phase. This obviously didn't sit very well with Raj, who has recast himself, and judging by your other panelists, they clearly saw Bal Thackeray as Dr. Evil. In that case, Raj Thackeray is mini-me. He's tried very hard to become a sort of mini Bal Thackeray, including the cartoons, including the way in which he behaves himself. The problem, I think, which Bal Thackeray had not worked out, is that there is still room for mini-me. There's still room for a Thackeray-like figure, at least when it comes to the cadres. Possibly the boys will make up. It's quite possible to have some kind of formula whereby Raj is party president and Uddhav is chairman or something of that sort. I don't think that's that unlikely. But my view, and again it's only a guess, is that eventually if they don't make up, the Shiv Sena cadres will go to the MNS. That is the future.
That is the future. Well, there was a message that Bal Thackeray put out a short while back where he asked the people of Maharashtra to take care of his legacies. He says, come forth and protect and stand by some of my legacies, my grandchildren. We're going to talk a little bit about that too, that sentiment he expressed. First, let's listen to Bal Thackeray when he made that appeal.
आणि महाराष्ट्राचं उत्कर्ष करून द्या अशीच मी आपल्या चरणी नतमस्तक होऊन प्रार्थना करेन. इमानाला महत्व द्या, आम्हाला नाही, एवढंच म्हणे. जय हिंद, जय महाराष्ट्र, वंदे मातरम, जय हो.
Well, that's an interesting appeal, Veer Sanghvi, to the people of Maharashtra. It was almost emotional. It was also one where he was suggesting that he thought that both these individuals have integrity and therefore that was not a distinction that you could draw. You talked about why he picked one over the other. Do you think at any point in time, had he lived on, he would have actively pressed for a rapprochement?
I think he did on several occasions, but he felt, and again, this is only his perspective, may be wrong, that Raj had become very arrogant and that Raj wasn't willing to listen. If Raj had come back to him, I mean, I said this on your channel to Rahul Kanwal a few days ago, the key to understanding Bal Thackeray is that he was an emperor or a godfather. If you went to him and you said, and I'm sure Mr. Dhoot and all his industrialist friends went, and you said, sir, I want this, sir, I want that, as the film industry went, he would do it. If Raj had come to him and had, sir, I want this, find something, he'd probably have done it. Bal Thackeray believed Raj had become too arrogant and wasn't willing to do it.
Interesting point there. We're going to go across to our correspondent in just a few moments to get a sense of what lies ahead tomorrow. A large number of events planned for tomorrow for the people of Mumbai to come and Maharashtra, of course, to come and pay their last respects. We're going to go through some of those plans and programs that are being put up with a correspondent, but a quick look at some more messages that have been coming in for Mr. Bal Thackeray over the last few hours. Let's listen in to some of those leaders who've come out and paid tribute today.
श्री बाल ठाकरे जी के निधन से बहुत बड़ी क्षति हुई है। ये महाराष्ट्र के लिए झटका है, ये राष्ट्र के लिए झटका है। ये एनडीए के लिए झटका है और बाल ठाकरे जी के निधन से एक युग का अंत हुआ है। वो जब तक जीवित रहे शेर की तरह जिए और भारतीय राजनीति पर उन्होंने एक बहुत मजबूत पकड़ बनाई। वो धारा के विपरीत भी तैरना जानते थे। भारतीय जनता पार्टी उनके निधन पर शोक व्यक्त करती है।
Well, let's look back on the life and times of Bal Thackeray. We put together this little package for you, vignette for you, that captures some of those key moments of a very eventful life.
He's the cartoonist who turned from the art of satire to the art of a personality cult, and a divisive political plank that led him to the strings of power. This was his first mega campaign in Mumbai in the late 60s, after the formation of the Shiv Sena in 1966. This is the same man addressing a mega rally in Mumbai 4 decades later. Here you see him with the DMK's Karunanidhi. Thackeray had just started a campaign against South Indian migration to Mumbai. 5 years later, here he is with Indira Gandhi, a supporter of the imposition of emergency. It was this grand alliance with Sharad Pawar and George Fernandez that brought Thackeray into the political centre stage, a war against the Mill Workers Union. Thackeray's relations with Amitabh typical of the frequent swing of his emotions. First, he supported a ban of Amitabh's movies in the aftermath of the Gopher scandal. Then this meeting changed it all. A lifelong friendship blossomed. This was the moment of victory as the BJP-Sena alliance came to power in Maharashtra. Thackeray squatting at the sound of fireworks in Girgaon Chowpatty as Advani looked on. Then the swearing-in ceremony. In the years that followed, Thackeray would be branded the sobriquet of the remote control. But the firebrand also had a lighter side, seen here playing billiards, carom, and even celebrating with champagne. And these were the last few months of filial bonhomie, before nephew Raj went his own way in 2006 to form the MNS. The past was built by the tiger, the future more uncertain. Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
Veer Sanghvi, in the mold of the old politicians, the larger-than-life politicians like the Patnaiks, etc., he had this quality where he knew what fun was all about too. And he brought that out on the center stage. He never hid it. He didn't hide his private life, unlike some other politicians tend to do. He projected it.
Well, aspects of his private life are certainly public.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think what people often forget about Bal Thackeray was that he was a man with a lot of detachment. He knew that he had chosen this emperor persona for himself, and he played that persona to the hilt. But there were times when, like Superman, he took off his cape and he sat down and he talked normally. I remember I was very young. In 1979, I was at Bombay magazine, a living media publication, ironically, and I'd gone to have a drink with him. And he said, "You keep writing about this disco called Studio 29. What is it?" So I told him what it was. And he said, "Do you think I could go?" So I said, "Do you know anything about dancing?" He said, "Well, we keep throwing stones. I must have learned something." So he was very funny in that way. He was able to laugh at himself. He never took that persona seriously when he was in private. But if it's ever anything to do with the public, then he became Bal Thackeray, the emperor.
We leave it at that. Thanks indeed for joining us.